Year 10 and 11, welcome to your video on the context of Macbeth in preparation for your English Literature GCSE exam. This video will be covering James I, Queen Elizabeth I, the Gunpowder Plot, and other significant historical developments just before the play was written. Okay, if we begin with the Great Chain of Being then. At the time, people believed that authority was derived by God. This great chain of being would mean God was at the top, and then angels, mankind, animals, bird, fish, etc., all the way down to minerals. I shall bring up a chart in a second. And in the order of human beings, the king was unmatched, absolute and dominant. Naturally, that is very important to us in Macbeth, because that would mean that King Duncan obviously is unmatched, absolute and dominant, and then naturally his heir to the throne would be his children or his named heir. Obviously this is going to cause a huge issue when Macbeth then decides to disrupt the natural order. There's a chart then, just to make it a bit clearer, and as you can see you've got some information on the left. So Elizabethans believed in the divine hierarchy that had been created by God. And this hierarchy, as I mentioned, is the chain of being, and it goes from God all the way down to your plants. And it's this belief that everything on earth, mankind included, has its place. And therefore, this great chain of being maintained order. And therefore, if you challenge your position or your place, then you disrupt the order, you disrupt the chain, and it'll lead to chaos. We know that that happens in Macbeth. One of our big themes in Macbeth is order versus disorder, the natural versus the supernatural. People were expected to respect their position. Those who accepted their given place were rewarded in heaven. An alarm bell should be ringing here, because we know that Macbeth doesn't respect his position, and therefore, I suppose to some degree, is punished by the end of the play, isn't he? Heaven and hell are referenced throughout the play. And then finally here again, alarm bell should be ringing. Women were always considered beneath men in the chain, with the exception of Queen Elizabeth I. It was believed that monarchs were chosen by God, and so held a divine right to their position. As we rightly know, Lady Macbeth is going to try and suppress her femininity. She's going to call on the witches. She's going to call on the supernatural. She wants to have characteristics and attributes that we associate with masculinity, and therefore she, much like her husband, is challenging the natural order. King James I, he came to the throne in 1603, and it would appear that Shakespeare uses the king's interests in Macbeth. He was interested in the supernatural, in witches and in prophecies. Please check out my video on witches and the supernatural as well if you need any guidance with that. We know that witches and the supernatural are huge in this play. In fact, they begin the play, don't they? They begin the entire play. They're the ones that give Macbeth this idea, which forces him then to disrupt the natural order. King James I also survived an assassination attempt. Again, very obvious in this play, Duncan is assassinated. And this was the Gunpowder Plot. I'm going to go into a lot more detail about that, so please hang around if you need it. And King James I was a great believer in the great chain of being. To murder the king was thought to bring harm to the country, and perhaps worse than that, defy God. So all of these things are setting up Macbeth and Macbeth's actions as something that caused imbalance within the country. And I suppose to some degree as an audience member, we know he could never really last as a king because of the way he got the crown, isn't it, through murder. More detail on the Gunpowder Plot then, massively important and referenced in the play. The silver medal, as you can see on screen there, you've got the front and you've got the back of it, was created to honour the discovery of the Gunpowder Plot. It was a medal that was given to the people who had uncovered this idea of killing King James I. The front of the medal, if you can see, I know it's not a brilliant picture there, contains a snake among flowers. So you've got lilies and you've got roses. And it symbolises, or it's supposed to symbolise, intrigue and deception. And the inscription reads, as you can see, those words there, I'm never going to be able to read that. And it translates as, "He who concealed himself is detected by order of the Senate." Now the reverse, again, if you can see that underneath, is the Tetragrammaton, with the name of God in Hebrew. And you've got a circle of thorns with the inscription written in the middle. around the outside, the inscription says, "You," as in God, "the keeper of James, have not slept." Now, there's some huge references to Macbeth here. We're going to go into the flower and the serpent in a moment, which is Lady Macbeth. But if this idea that sleep is mentioned, sleep is a huge theme of ours, isn't it? The king is murdered in his sleep. Once Macbeth has murdered the king, he can't sleep. He says, "Macbeth doth murder sleep." The last time we see Lady Macbeth, she is sleepwalking through the castle out damn spot. So sleep is massive. The fact that it's on this medal, this medallion, again, influences our play. It shows us, I suppose, or foreshadows what's going to happen to those who deceive, to those who commit regicide. In terms of references to the play, then obviously we have the massive, massive, massive line, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." Again, at the time, your audience would be privy to this information about the gunpowder plot. We would know that this is referencing those who uncovered it. You've got to ask yourself what this foreshadows. Yes, okay, it's talking about deception, and that's one of the big themes in terms of Lady Macbeth, but it's also foreshadowing to the audience members that this plot of killing the king and trying to usurp him and succeed without him isn't going to come into fruition, really, is it? She echoes the image of the medal, which would be well known to the audience, and associates their planned deception with treason, as we well know. And throughout the play, there are other words which would be significant in terms of the audience and the gunpowder plot. You've got blow, vault, and train. So again, by using language associated with the violent act at the time, and this idea of trying to disrupt the natural order, the audience would know, the audience would be aware, they would know, I suppose, the ramifications of attempting to kill the king. And the play's themes of secrecy, plotting, usurpation, and regicide are hugely important at the time. So obviously Macbeth is using all of these historical events to feed the play. And in terms of the punishment that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth suffer, well, we know that it is their deaths, isn't it? Lady Macbeth dies off stage. Macbeth dies horrifically on stage. I just want to bring up some quick quotations about order and disorder because I've mentioned it a couple of times, so you've got some idea of where we might reference them. What Shakespeare does a lot of times with the order and disorder idea is that he juxtaposes his language or his syntax. So I've just put a couple here. You've got "you know your own degrees." I want the animal ones here to stand out a bit more because I think they're very good. You've got "a falcon towering in her pride of place by a mousing owl hawked at and killed." So the idea that the falcon is killed by the owl is showing us that the animals also begin to commit disorderly acts. We would always think that a falcon was more predatory than the owl. So again, we've got this idea that the natural order is being disrupted everywhere because of the actions of Macbeth, because of the supernatural element. You've got the juxtaposition of fair is foul and foul is fair. Look at this paradox, this idea of disorder, and then that's mimicked in cannot be ill and cannot be good. And then at the bottom there, just again, another quote that you might want to use is "First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself." Massive section by Macbeth. Again, here he's strong against the deed, as he says, but ultimately goes to commit it. So we've got this throughout, this conflict between the order and the disorder of things, and it's quite prevalent throughout the play. And the order and disorder disrupts nature, as we've just discussed with the animals. We then get this in the natural world. I don't expect you to remember it, but we've got this massive quote from Lennox. "The night has been unruly," if you can try and remember that. "Where we lay our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events, new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamoured the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverish and did shake." So I would try and remember the night has been unruly, and then I've put in bolder there, "Some say the earth was feverish and did shake." And this is after the murder of the king. So the disorder and the imbalance in the natural world, we wonder, is this an influence of the supernatural? The fact that Macbeth has believed the prophecies of the witches and acted on it, and it's caused imbalance everywhere. Yeah, the whole the great chain of being has now been disrupted. And lastly, just to mention King Duncan and his flaw, I suppose. Naturally, we get flaws, tragic flaws in our tragic heroes, and Macbeth's got his flaw, but actually Duncan also has his. He is the first king we meet, but he seems to have the flaw of misjudging people. Macduff refers to him as the most sainted king. Okay, so that's an interesting description, but he might be the most sainted king, but he doesn't understand his own men, because he refers to Macbeth as he was a gentleman on whom I built my absolute trust. So look at that. Remember, in the beginning of the play, Macbeth is described as brave, and now we get this idea that Duncan built his absolute trust on Macbeth. So again, we know as an audience that he has misjudged Macbeth and Macbeth's loyalty. And he also then refers to Lady Macbeth as fair and noble hostess. Again, as we rightly know, he hasn't judged her correctly either, because she is the character who initially brings in this theme of deception and treason. So Duncan has his own flaw there in terms of being a king. This was just quick revision on the context of Macbeth. I hope it's been useful. Please check out my Macbeth playlist if you need Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Ambition, The Witches, Banquo and things like that. Subscribe on YouTube, Stacey Reay, and if you need anything on Twitter, my name is @_Stacey_English, where I tweet quotes and links and images, and you can also ask questions on there if you like. Massive good luck in your English literature exam.